In today's session, we'll be taking a look at what is an Internet security policy, the definition for an Internet security policy, the objectives for an Internet security policy, and we'll be taking a look at what are the inputs we should consider while we are drafting an Internet security policy for an organization. And also we'll have a brief outlook on what are the contents inside an Internet security policy. And this lecture is based on the PhD thesis submitted by Sharman from Monash University, and his thesis is titled as an exploratory investigation of the use of an Internet security policy to manage the Internet security problem for organizations. So all the content I have taken is from this particular thesis. We'll first take a look at the definition for an Internet security policy. What is this policy? A policy is a written document, and what an Internet security policy contains is it is the medium by which we specify the Internet security requirements for an organization. And we also specify the guidance and rules that every employee or the Internet participants should follow while they are using the Internet by logging into the company's network. So that is what an Internet security policy is. It gives the Internet security requirements and the guidance for the users. Let us take a look at the four important objectives of Internet security policy. The first objective is we have to specify all the security requirements, Internet security requirements. The second objective is we have to mention all the rules that our users who are using the Internet should follow. And the third one is we should protect our firm or our organization from any legal liabilities. Say, what is this legal liability? An employee from your firm, if he just like that copies code online and then says or has that code to be part of your product, or takes images online and puts that to be part of your product, and you start selling your product online, then you will face legal issues. So how is that you're going to protect your company from such legal liabilities? That also should be part of your Internet security policy. And your policy should be focused on maximizing the internet usage, whereas it should be for business purposes, and personal usage should be restricted as much as possible. So these are the four main objectives of an Internet security policy. Now we'll take a look at the kind of inputs we need to consider while we are drafting an Internet security policy for an organization. The very first input we have to consider is Internet risks. Say when your employees are using the Internet by logging into your company's network, there are chances that a lot of issues can happen because of the employees or because of intruders who are trying to intrude into the system. So the list of issues is given in this diagram. The very first thing is theft of information can happen when an employee uses a weak password, or when some ports are open, when some applications without license or without support is being downloaded and used. There's always a chance for an intruder to intrude and steal information. Denial of service attacks can happen. Accidental disclosure of information through emails can happen. Inappropriate emails can be sent by your employees to others, and by that issues can happen. Pirated media, copyright issues can happen by copying information on the internet. And hacking, fraud, carrying fraudulent transactions by using your company's network, and using internet for accessing inappropriate content for non-business usages, and downloading corrupted or erroneous software. All these things are bound to happen. So your internet security policy should be focused on safeguarding your organization and also your employees from any kind of misuse or abuse. Either your employees abusing others or any intruder abusing your employees should be prevented by the internet security policy. So for that you have to consider all the kinds of internet risks that are bound to happen. And the next thing is you have to identify the likelihood of such risks. Say there can be certain risks that has an higher chance of happening, and there can be certain risks with a lower chance of happening, and the impact of these risks can also vary. Certain risks will have a high impact and certain risks will have a low impact. Say a distributed denial of service attack on your system can have a high impact on your business if your service is not able to take it up, right? So in that case, what kind of mitigation you're going to follow, or what kind of actions you're going to take in response matters. So you have to first identify all the internet threats that your organization can face, and then you have to identify the likelihood of those threats and the impact of those threats. We have to assess the risks, and then we can try thinking about the countermeasures. We can also get to know what kind of attacks happened by historical statistical data. So in the past, what kind of breaches have happened. You can also get opinion from professionals, and security advice can be seek from security experts. So all these things you can get to know what kind of threats will happen, and if it happens, what will be the impact. Once when you know that these are the risks and this is the likelihood of these risks happening, you can go and think about the countermeasures, the mitigation strategies for such risks, and your internet security policy should be focused on the countermeasures for such risks. The next input that you have to consider while you're drafting an internet security policy is administrative issues. Say I have an internet security policy, then I need the staff that will be actually auditing the policy. They will be drafting the policy. They will be monitoring whether the people, whether the users are actually following the policy, and they will also be reviewing and upgrading the policy frequently. So we need the right staff members to carry out all these tasks. You have to look into the fact that whether the organization is willing to invest in such kind of activities, and what is the feasibility that your organization will support such activities should be explored, and should also be brought out, like who is responsible for auditing, reviewing, updating the policy frequently, and monitoring whether the employees are actually following what is written in the policy. For that you need an administrative team, and whether your organization is willing to invest on that. That comes under administrative issues. The next kind of important factor that you have to consider while you're drafting an internet security policy is technical issues. Is your organization willing to spend on purchasing hardware and software that will help us in providing internet security? Say there may be an requirement for purchase of a firewall or purchase of a network security suite. So is your organization willing to spend that amount in purchasing that, in having the supporting staff to maintain the hardware and software, and also to spend money on upgrading whatever that is being purchased? So when you're drafting an internet security policy, you should also be focusing on such inputs. Human issues. This is another very important thing. So you can have a very stringent security policy that says I can allow only emails for professional use. I'll block all the other sites. Sounds very good, right? You cannot even access your Gmail, or you cannot even browse for your say news website. You can't do anything. You just access your email, and then that too only for professional purposes. Everything else is blocked. And I can also come out with a policy that says we'll monitor every email that's being sent out from the company's network. So this kind of a stringent policy may sound very good from the uh, management perspective, but from the employees perspective, it might be an issue. It might be like too much of invasion into their privacy, or else it can be like too much of restriction, and they may not be really happy with such an internet security policy. So what is required? What is required to be blocked? What is required uh, to be allowed? All these things can be drafted after getting the perspectives or opinions from different stakeholders, different people who play different roles inside the organization. So all their inputs also matter when it comes to drafting an internet security policy. That's what human issues mean when it comes to internet security policies. So now we will focus on the actual content inside the internet security policy. Say an internet security policy itself has got so many sub policies. and each sub policy itself is a policy. Again, it's a set of guidelines. So we have seen email policy in our previous class. We have taken a sample email policy. We looked at what is acceptable usage, non-acceptable usage with respect to an email, what is email signature, how we build a brand image using emails. We looked at so many things. Email security, we looked at the passwords, how to avoid phishing emails, how to avoid sending any kind of abusive or harassment kind of stuff to others. So these things we have seen. So that itself is a separate policy. And email policy, if we take a look at the internet security policy content, email policy is part of an internet security policy content. And whatever you are looking at here, everything is a separate policy like an email policy we have seen in the previous class. Due to time limitations, we will not go through every policy in depth. If you are interested, I've given that title of the PhD thesis submitted by the scholar. You can go and very well read through this entire thesis. It's 402 pages, and you'll get very good, very in-depth information on how to write internet security policies and what all factors you have to consider while writing them. Okay, now let us quickly run over this. Say first, what you have to have in an internet security policy is you should have the purpose and scope of the policy. The purpose and scope is given here. I'll read it out. The purpose of this policy is to protect the organization's network and data from unauthorized access, corruption, or service disruption as a result of internet usage. So the purpose is very clearly mentioned. And the next thing is the policy applies to all staff members, whether they are permanent or contract or non-contract, whatever it is. This policy applies to all staff members. So they're making the purpose and the scope very clear in the very first part of the document. And we'll take a look at other things. I have just taken some of the important things here, and I have highlighted what kind of content will exist inside an internet security policy. But it's not that only this should be part of an internet security policy. There are a lot of other things which are omitted because of time constraints. Let us look at internet privacy policy. What is this? Say when a user is using your organization's network to access the internet, it is your duty to provide the required privacy for the user. Say if I am going to use your corporate email and send emails, obviously some kind of encryption should be provided for the email so that my data is not getting breached or being accessed outside the network. So that kind of a thing should be guaranteed. Again, every user logins should be put up in some log files. Say we should know who is logging into the system so that we can avoid any kind of infringements or impersonations that can happen. So we have to ensure that we have to provide the support in such a way that the users who are using internet feel that their privacy is not being invaded. So that's what this says. Technological measures should be provided for encryption and any necessary infringements of employee privacy, for example logging of employee internet activity and scanning of employee email. Again, the next thing is when it comes to privacy, it is ethical to inform your employees that they are being monitored and their activity is being logged. So if you are monitoring your employees, you have to say what you are monitoring and where it is being logged and who can access these logs. So this should be very clearly stated in the internet privacy policy for your organization. Employees should be well aware of what is being monitored, who is monitoring, and what is being logged on a day-to-day basis. Internet censorship policy, it is straightforward. What is going to be blocked, what my employees cannot access, and what my employees are allowed to access. Obviously, inappropriate content, entertainment sites, movie sites, all these things will be blocked. Some organizations are very strict. Even Gmail is getting blocked. Yeah, that is possible. That is there. You cannot access even your Gmail or your news websites. Nothing. Only emails are allowed, and maybe any sites related to their company products can be allowed. So that is the censorship policy. So it should be very clear what is being allowed, and this policy should state what is being allowed and what is being blocked, censored. For instance, in VIT also we have this policy, right? If you try downloading software from oracle.com, it will allow you to download software from such sites. Whereas you try downloading from some other sites that's not trustworthy, immediately that site will be blocked. So you'll not be allowed to download any illegal software using the institution's network, right? So that is internet censorship policy. You'll also get this message, your administrator has blocked this website. And internet responsibility and accountability policy. So this is a sub policy under internet security policy. What does that mean? It means that a clear-cut policy document should be there which says what are the roles of various employees who support internet security and what is their accountability is. Say when you talk about an organization, you'll have network administrators, IT security managers, business unit managers. So there will be a group which is responsible for purchase of equipments for network security. There will be a group which will be responsible for maintaining the software, upgrading the security softwares and things like that. There will be a group that will be responsible for creating awareness among employees towards network security related incidents and how to avoid them. So all these things, the roles of everyone should be defined, and this policy is about that. And we should also define employees and their accountability and the roles in the organization with respect to internet usage. So that kind of a policy document is called internet responsibility and accountability policy. The next thing, sub policy, is internet information protection policy. Say there can be certain information that should be protected from the outside world. Intruders from the outside world should not be able to reach to that information. So it is protected from the internet. That is the meaning of this. So how will you protect such data? Say source code of your applications should be protected. Say patents, innovations, all these things will not be available to the outside world except for the a set group of people inside your firm, and it's not available on the internet. So such kind of things will have internet information protection policy created for that. So what this policy says is this policy should define the corporate data and websites which require protection from the outside world. We should also include a policy for storing sensitive data in a safe place, inaccessible to internet intruders. So this is such critical data that hackers should not be able to reach to this, and you should protect it in such a way. And you have to draft a policy on how we are going to provide such a protection. So that comes under Internet Information Protection Policy. The next policy is Internet Information Access Policy. Say if you're joining an organization, you will request internet access. So for requesting internet access, what is the procedure? What kind of documents you have to submit? What kind of verifications you have to go through? That comes under Internet Information Access Policy. So what this policy says is this policy should specify internet access requirements to internal data and websites for different parties, say for example groups of employees, individual employees, suppliers. A policy for requesting internet access privileges and internet services is also required. The Internet Information Access Policy is supplemented by the Internet Firewall Policy. So we have different categories of users, and for each category of users there will be different levels of access that should be provided, and how these users are going to request and how such verification will happen and request will be granted will be present in the Internet Access Policy, Internet Information Access Policy. As part of gaining the access, the users will also be asked to sign an agreement. So there will be a list of guidelines and users should go through that, sign an agreement. So this is all part of the access grant procedures. Firewall policy. So what is firewall policy? Say certain applications can bypass the firewall. They can be permitted to. And certain permissions can be given to users for performing certain tasks that can be allowed by the firewall. So for all these things, the employee should follow the procedures. Say if an employee is going to perform a secure FTP to another application, and by default the firewall is going to block any kind of FTP happening, then the employee should go through this firewall policy to get permission so that he can perform such an activity and he can bypass the firewall. So again, pings will be blocked by the firewalls. If anybody is going to ping me, or anybody is going to send a lot of ping packets, what a firewall will do is it will drop the packets, right? It is like prevention of any kind of DOS attacks on the system. So in that case, how to verify whether a ping is legitimate or not? By checking the digital signature and things like that, and allowing legitimate traffic. So all these things are firewall policies, and some users can also be given unrestricted net usage. For this they have to get the appropriate permissions by following the procedures in the firewall policy. So we have some more sub policies which we have to discuss before winding up this session. So we have this password policy. We have discussed password policy with respect to emails too. Every organization will have a password policy, like the length of the password, the type of special characters. They have to use of small letters and capital letters and all these things. And they will also instruct you to avoid use of commonly used passwords, and passwords that are part of your name, or you should not use birthdays to be part of your passwords. That comes under password policy. The next thing is very important. This is the key policy under internet security policy, that is called internet acceptable usage policy. So what is internet acceptable usage policy? It is a policy drafted purely for the employees, and the main intention of this policy is to control employee from misusing and abusing the internet, and assisting employees in dealing with external misuse and abuse. Say someone outside your organization can also make use of the internet to abuse your employees. So we have to prevent it both ways, and we have to maximize effective business use of the internet. So that comes under internet acceptable usage policy. This itself is a sub policy. So when you talk about internet acceptable usage policy, so these are the subheadings under internet acceptable usage policy. We'll just take a look at some of the things here. That is, in this policy you have to say what is acceptable usage. You have to give a lot of samples for explaining the employee what is acceptable usage. Say browsing educational websites or registering for online classes, these things can be acceptable usage for an university. What is unacceptable usage? There should be many use cases given, and the employee should be well aware of what are unacceptable usage with respect to internet usage in an organization. Maybe downloading software from inappropriate sites, or browsing inappropriate content, or sending abusive emails. All these things can be use cases for unacceptable uses. The employee should be well aware of all the internet risks. Say for instance, FTP, Telnet, or SSH, or remote access, whatever they perform, they should know the dangers of performing all these things, and they should take appropriate precautions, and they should follow the procedures in the manual, in the internet security policy, to acquire permission and perform such an action. They should never perform anything without the prior approval of the security officer or from his manager. Before getting into such things, they should follow the manual internet security policy to get the approval and perform it. So that is about internet risks. Legal policy, again they should be well aware of the local laws and international laws with respect to intellectual property and copyrights violations. So any kind of violations they perform, they should know what kind of legal issues can happen. Privacy, so every employee should be well informed of what is being monitored, where that information is getting logged, and who is responsible for monitoring, and who can access the monitored information. So all these things should be known to the employee, and the employee should also know the kind of encryption strategies or logs that we maintain in an organization. So monitoring and surveillance, that's what this means. So privacy is all about how his information is protected when he's using the company's network for internet usage. Sanctions is another interesting thing. Say sanctions is what kind of sanctions will happen if this employee is not complying with the policies given. Say the policy very well says do not download illegal software, and if he is going to somehow download illegal software and make use of it, then what kind of actions will be taken against that employee? That kind of an action can go up till termination, and that should be given very clearly under the sanctions heading. So awareness is like the policy should detail all the uh, programs that are meant to create awareness for an employee regarding the use of appropriate guidelines when it comes to internet usage. User consent, it talks about the document that the employee will be signing when he is given access to the internet. So you should follow certain guidelines, right? So you will be signing this user consent for accessing the internet. So that comes under internet acceptable usage policy. I hope you are clear with that. The next thing is internet publication policy. So again, very important thing. Say we have our VIT website. We are publishing a lot of content on this website. The question is, what is the process? Say who is approving the content? Say we are getting the content from the professors or the faculty or the students, and then there will be a review of the content. We have to check whether this content has been stolen from somewhere else on the internet. We have to make those checks before putting that on our own website, because if that is having any copyright violations, then it will be a legal issue. So internet publication policy, what it says is there should be a policy detailing guidelines for the division, allocation, electronic publication, and dissemination of information over the internet. So there should be a clear-cut process, and the internet security policy should define how you disseminate information over the internet. Email policy we have already discussed in detail, and internet audit policy. Say you're having a very good security policy, you're saying don't access this, don't do this, you get access like this, you get firewall access like that, but you should also have a team which monitors and checks whether the employees are following what is being prescribed, right? So that is the internet audit policy. They will carry out audits. Maybe they can verify logs to check whether logs are being made. They can verify how the access is given, being granted to employees. They can make audit on all these things. The next policy is on internet incident response. So what is internet incident response? Contingency plans, backup procedures, and disaster recovery steps. Say if a denial of service attack happens and your server goes down, how you have to bring it back, how quick you have to bring it back. And they also talk about the spokesperson who is responsible for updating the media and the public on the status of the recovery steps and how soon your systems will be up online. So all these things comes under incident response. We will be taking care of the incident that happened with respect to an internet usage, and how that response will be, and how the status of the response will be updated to the public. So it's again a big policy document. We are just having a brief outlook on these things. Internet legal policy. Definitely, when you're using the internet, you should know the local laws and also the international laws. You should not do anything that will deviate from the norms and then will put you under legal issues. So, internet security policy should see to that the employees are well aware of all these laws, so that the firm does not end up with any such liabilities. Internet security policy review. So this itself is a policy. Say we put up some policy and we say that this is what we are going to follow. But periodically there should be a team that should review this policy. It should upgrade this policy. It should also take care of updating this policy with all the employees so that everyone follows the updated policy. Say there can be 10 internet risks currently, but later on hackers can get upgraded and there can be 15 more risks that come in. So employees should be frequently updated. Your security policy should also be updated to deal with such kind of attacks. So that's about an internet security policy. I hope you all had some brief idea about what is an internet security policy and what are the objectives of an internet security policy, what kind of inputs we should consider while we are drafting an internet security policy for an organization. And we also looked at some of the sub policies in an internet security policy, and we went through some of the important key policies like internet acceptable usage policy, which is drafted in specific for employees, and all the other policies. Every policy has got its own importance. With that, let us wind up this session. Thank you.